They want to know, is it either E-Dog from O Block or Boss Top you're talking about in those 5 people?
I ain't got no comment, man.
Okay. That's very specific, right?
That is very, it's kind of too specific.
What happens in jail stays in jail. That is what they say. That is the code. That is the unwritten rule that everybody who has ever been inside those walls understands from day one. You do not talk about what happened on the deck. You do not expose who fought who and who backed down and who was really about it and who was performing for the cameras. You keep it inside. But Big Mike does not care about that rule anymore. Because Big Mike, O'Block Big Mike, the man who caught 28 years for King Vaughn, the man who was inside those walls when all of this was going down, just sat down in front of a camera and told the complete truth about what happened in that jail. About E-Dog. About KTS Dre. About the rumors that tore relationships apart and the real conversations that put them back together. About who was really feared on that deck and who was pretending. About the hug that is waiting for E-Dog the next time Big Mike sees him in the street. And Chicago? Chicago is not ready for what Big Mike just said. Stay locked in. This one is personal. Now let us set the full picture. Because before we get into what Big Mike revealed about E-Dog, about KTS Dre, about the jail deck and what really happened inside those walls, we need to understand who all of these people are and why this conversation is hitting Chicago the way it is hitting right now. Because this is not just a jail story. This is not just 2 men who had a fight behind bars and eventually worked it out. This is a story about rumors and misinformation and how false information spreads through the streets and the internet and creates real-world consequences for real people who had nothing to do with the original situation.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay. A little breadcrumb there.
Yeah, it's kind of too specific, but I'm gonna tell you like this. I'm not gonna confirm nor deny neither one of those names.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
You know, I with E-Dog, man. Why see E-Dog?
And Big Mike, the man at the center of all of this, the man who has been sitting down for these interviews and dropping bomb after bomb about Chicago rap politics, is uniquely positioned to tell this story. Because he was there. He was on those decks. He was in those conversations. He was present for the specific moments that the internet has been speculating about for years without ever having access to someone who actually knew what happened. Now let us start with E-Dog. Because E-Dog is the one whose name came up in the most interesting way in this interview. E-Dog, a member of the O-Block extended community, has been mentioned in previous Big Mike interviews in connection with a list of 5 rappers that Big Mike said he knows are lying. 5 people who go on social media and portray themselves in ways that do not match who they actually are or what they actually did before they got famous. 5 people who have built reputations on stories that Big Mike, from his specific position of having been present in that world, knows do not hold up. And the fans have been going crazy trying to figure out who those 5 people are. Hitting the like button on interview videos. Sending questions. Demanding specifics. And 2 names have consistently come up in the community's speculation. E-Dog and Boss Top. Both connected to O-Block. Both figures in the Chicago rap ecosystem. Both names that would make enormous sense in the context of what Big Mike is talking about when he discusses people who built reputations on narratives that he knows from the inside are not completely accurate.
I heard he said he want to give me a big hug when he see me.
for real?
So E-Dog went, you know, since I know you want to give me a big hug when you see me, I'm going to give you an even bigger one.
Y'all wildin', man. Wildin', bro.
And when the interviewer asked Big Mike directly, "Is it E-Dog or Boss Top you are talking about in those 5 people?" Big Mike's response was classic Big Mike. He did not confirm. He did not deny. He said it is kind of too specific, and I am not going to confirm nor deny neither one of those names. And that non-answer, that deliberate strategic refusal to go all the way, is itself a statement. Because Big Mike has shown in these interviews that he is perfectly capable of directly naming people when he wants to, of saying exactly what he thinks without the diplomatic dance. And when he chooses not to deny a specific name, when he specifically says, "I am not going to confirm nor deny," that silence carries its own meaning. And then he said something about E-Dog specifically that changed the entire temperature of the interview. He said he had heard that E-Dog wants to give him a big hug when he sees him. And Big Mike's response was simple and direct and understood by everybody who has ever moved in these circles. He said, "Since I know you want to give me a big hug when you see me, I am going to give you an even bigger one." That is not a friendly statement. That is not two old friends from the neighborhood expressing mutual affection. In the specific language and the specific context of Chicago street culture, that is a warning. That is Big Mike putting E-Dog on notice that whatever energy E-Dog is moving with is going to be matched and exceeded when their paths cross. And Chicago understood that immediately. And the comment sections understood it immediately. And E-Dog, wherever he is watching this from, understood it immediately. Because Big Mike does not make empty statements. His track record of saying exactly what he means and meaning exactly what he says has been established across enough interviews at this point that nobody who pays attention to Chicago rap politics is going to hear that hug comment and think it means anything other than what it clearly means. And the interviewer pushed a little further, asking whether E-Dog was one of the people who got thrown in a trash can. This is a reference to a specific claim that has been circulating in Chicago about a physical confrontation involving E-Dog being put in a trash can. And Big Mike, who had been giving these carefully worded non-answers about the 5 liars, went somewhere different with this one. He said no. Not in a rushed way. Not in a way that suggested he was protecting information. Just a flat no. E-Dog was not one of the people who got thrown in the trash can. And then Big Mike got serious. Visibly serious. The kind of serious that tells you the topic has hit somewhere personal and the public part of the conversation is over. He said he still has to give E-Dog that super big hug when he sees him. And the interviewer, reading the room correctly, said we will leave that for what it is and moved on. Because some things do not need to be said explicitly to be completely understood by everybody listening. Because the KTS Dre situation is where this interview goes from drama to something genuinely important. Something that actually matters beyond the beef and the speculation and the Chicago rap politics. Because the KTS Dre and GB Capo situation is a story about how false information spreads in these communities. About how a rumor, a piece of misinformation that nobody verified, that nobody traced back to its source, that nobody checked against the actual reality of what happened, can create real-world consequences that affect real people in real ways. GB Capo was a member of the O Block and GB community. He was killed. And after his death, in the specific way that information moves through Chicago streets and through social media simultaneously, a rumor emerged that KTS Dre had something to do with his murder. KTS Dre, Chicago rapper, known for being genuinely feared in jail environments, known for being the kind of person who does not de-escalate situations but rather escalates them to their most extreme possible conclusion, was being blamed for GB Capo's death. And Big Mike was in jail at the time. Was on the deck. Was fighting his own case, the murder case connected to King Von that he has spoken about across multiple interviews. And somebody, one of his own people, came to him while they were walking through a tunnel connecting different sections of the jail and told him that Dre had something to do with Capo getting killed. And Big Mike, who was loyal to his people, who understood what that kind of information demanded as a response, made a decision based on what he had been told. He fought KTS Dre. And here is where the story gets complicated. Because almost immediately after the fight, in the specific way that jail environments create space for honest conversations that the outside world rarely produces, KTS Dre told Big Mike directly that he had nothing to do with GB Capo's murder. That the information that had been spread was wrong. That somebody had either deliberately or accidentally put his name on something he had no involvement in. And Big Mike, who had just fought this man based on that information, listened. And believed him. Not naively. Not because he was desperate to avoid a continued conflict with somebody with KTS Dre's reputation. But because Dre's manner of saying it, the specific directness of how he addressed it, the fact that he had been saying it before they even fought, had the quality of truth rather than the quality of self-defense. Because here is what Big Mike said about KTS Dre that stopped the interviewer cold. He said, KTS Dre is not the type of person who would deny something he actually did. He trolls. He is going to let you know if he did it. And that character assessment, that specific observation about the kind of person KTS Dre actually is the thing that made Big Mike believe him. Because somebody who is genuinely the type to not only do violent things but to let people know he did them, That person does not deny involvement in something he actually was involved in. The psychology does not fit. And so Big Mike and KTS Dre, two men who had come into conflict in a jail based on false information, became cool. Became something approaching mutual respect. And Big Mike was honest enough to say that Dre was a real problem in that jail. That people did not want to fight him. That even people from Big Mike's own side were not willing to go at KTS Dre directly. That it took Big Mike himself, who had his own established reputation for not backing down, to be the one who actually followed through on the confrontation. And what makes that admission so significant is what Big Mike says next. He gives KTS Dre credit. Publicly. On camera. He says, even if I do not like him, even if he did something to me, if he is that, then he is that. You cannot hide that. The people who want to be seen as the toughest in Chicago do not want to admit it. They do not want to acknowledge that there are other people out there who have a legitimate claim to that kind of reputation. But Big Mike, who has his own battles, his own history, his own standing in the community, is secure enough in who he is to give somebody he had a conflict with their honest assessment. And then he said the line that the entire interview had been building toward. The line that Chicago needed to hear from somebody who has been through everything Big Mike has been through. The line that cuts through all of the tough guy posturing and the street credibility performances and the social media claims of being the most dangerous this or the most feared that. He said, all the tough dudes is dying. All the tough dudes is going to prison. I do not want to be tough. I want to be free. I want to get rich. 7 words. I want to be free. I want to get rich. From a man who caught 28 years for protecting King Von. From a man who has been inside those walls and watched what the tough guy life actually produces at the end of the road. From a man who has earned the right to say that with a credibility that nobody who has not lived it can claim. And that line, those 7 words, are why this interview matters beyond the drama and the names and the specific details about who fought who on what deck. Because Big Mike is saying something that Chicago needs to hear. Is saying that the game that so many young men are being consumed by, the game of toughness and reputation and street credibility, has a predictable endpoint. And that endpoint is not what the music makes it look like. Because the endpoint is what Big Mike is living. Is what he has been living since the night that his loyalty to King Von put him in a position where he caught 28 years while Von walked free. Is what he sees in the faces of every man he has encountered in those jail environments. The KTS Dre's and the E-Dogs and the countless others who came into those spaces as the result of decisions made in the specific context of wanting to be seen as tough, wanting to be seen as real. Wanting to be seen as somebody not to be played with in a city that treats that kind of reputation as the ultimate currency. And the 051 Melly and Wooski situation is the final piece of this interview that needs to be examined. Because this rumor, the claim that 051 Melly accidentally shot Wooski, has been circulating in Chicago for years. And it is the kind of rumor that damages real people's reputations in ways that have real consequences. That changes how people move. That creates tensions and conflicts and situations that would never have existed if the false information had never been put into circulation. And Big Mike shut it down completely. He said not a lick of it. Not 1 ounce of truth to it. And then he added the detail that makes the rumor not just wrong but completely impossible on its face. When Wooski got accidentally shot, when the incident that the rumor is supposedly describing actually happened, Wooski was a teenager. Was still a kid. And Melly was not part of his world yet. Had not met him. Was not someone Wooski even knew beyond maybe being aware of who he was. Think about what that means for how this rumor spread. It means that somebody put together a story connecting 2 people in a specific incident, an accidental shooting, without checking the basic timeline of when those 2 people even knew each other. And that story spread across the internet and through the streets and became accepted as common knowledge by people who never had the ability to check it against reality. Who never had access to somebody like Big Mike, somebody who was actually present in those communities during those years and who knows the actual timeline of who knew who and when. And this is the pattern that Big Mike's interviews are consistently exposing. The pattern of how misinformation moves through Chicago rap communities and the internet simultaneously. How a rumor starts somewhere, sometimes from deliberate disinformation, sometimes from innocent miscommunication, sometimes from the specific way that half-heard stories transform as they pass from person to person, and becomes accepted as truth before anyone with the actual knowledge to check it ever gets asked. And the consequences of that misinformation are not abstract. The consequences are Big Mike fighting KTS Dre in jail, based on a false accusation that somebody put in his ear. The consequences are KTS Dre, whatever anybody thinks about his reputation and his history, being blamed for a murder he had nothing to do with and dealing with the real-world responses that blame generates in an environment as dangerous as a Chicago County jail. The consequences are Wooski having his name attached to a rumor about how he got shot that has nothing to do with what actually happened. Real consequences. For real people. Generated by information that had no foundation in reality. And Big Mike is in a unique position to address all of it. Because he was there. Because he has the specific credibility that comes from having lived inside these communities. Not as an observer, not as a journalist, not as somebody who covered these stories from the outside, but as somebody who was on those decks, who had those conversations, who fought those fights and then sat with the people he fought and learned the truth from them directly. And his willingness to tell that truth, even when it means admitting that he acted on false information, even when it means giving credit to somebody he had a conflict with, even when it means saying things about E-Dog that are going to have real-world implications the next time those two men see each other. That willingness is the quality that makes Big Mike's interviews matter in a way that most content about Chicago rap does not. Because most content about Chicago rap is about building narratives. About confirming what people already believe. About giving audiences the drama and the confirmation of existing assumptions that they came looking for. Big Mike is doing something different. He is correcting the record. Is insisting on accuracy even when accuracy is uncomfortable. Is using the platform he has built through these interviews to push back against the specific kind of misinformation that he has watched destroy friendships and create conflicts and send people to jail and to graves over stories that were never true to begin with. And that ending, that moment where he says he is done being seen in a police station or a jail, that he wants to be free, that he wants to get rich, that is not just a personal declaration. It is an invitation. To everybody listening. To everybody who is still inside the game that Big Mike has been describing across all of these interviews. The game of toughness and reputation and loyalty to codes that ultimately produce the same outcome over and over again. He is saying, there is another way. Not as a lecture. Not as a moral lesson delivered from on high. But as a man who has lived the alternative and is telling you from experience that it is not worth it. I do not want to be tough. I want to be free. I want to get rich. Chicago heard that. The question is whether Chicago is ready to listen. Do you believe KTS Dre when he says he had nothing to do with GB Capo's murder, or do you think Big Mike got played? And what do you think about Big Mike's line about not wanting to be tough? Do you think that hits different coming from somebody who has actually lived the alternative? Drop everything in the comments right now. This community goes deep on Chicago rap politics, and we want your real thoughts. Not the safe version, the actual one. If this video gave you something that no other channel gave you today, hit that like button immediately. Share this with somebody who has been following the Big Mike interview series, because this episode dropped details that change how you read everything else he has said. The full picture always matters more than the clips. And if you are not subscribed, this is the channel that covers Chicago rap with the depth and the honesty it actually deserves. Not surface-level takes. Not 30-second reactions. The full story every single time. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell. Do not miss a single upload.